Dark chosen ones, 5 shadow powers that make you untouchable, even by demons. There is a reality that very few will ever touch, not because it's hidden, but because most people are not built to survive it. It's not a realm of light, not the blissful plains of angels or the peaceful dimensions where incense and mantras lead. No, this is the domain of the dark chosen ones, the ones who are not offered enlightenment through beauty and love, but through destruction, silence, and unimaginable inner war. And if you're listening to this, something in your soul already knows you were never meant to be normal. You were never meant to fit the mold. You were never meant to follow the light blindly. You were meant to walk into the abyss and return with a crown. But why do some of us get marked? Why do some souls come into this world with a storm in their chest and a volcano in their eyes? Why do we go through betrayal after betrayal, loss after loss, initiations that would kill another person, but somehow we're still standing? It's not because we're cursed, it's because we're forged. There is a path that is only walked by the dark chosen ones. It's not found in scriptures. It's not celebrated by society, but it is real, and it is powerful beyond comprehension.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound spiritual lesson.
In the beginning, you don't know what's happening to you. You just know you're different. You feel things other people don't feel. You see through lies even when no one else can. You're drawn to the mystery. You're magnetized by the unspoken. And somewhere deep inside, you feel watched, not in a paranoid way, but as if something ancient and intelligent is observing your every move, waiting for a specific moment to reveal itself. That moment is the threshold. And when you reach it, there is no turning back. Crossing the threshold is not a choice. It's a soul agreement. It often begins when your life shatters. You lose someone you love. You face a trauma so deep it silences you for months. Or perhaps you wake up one day and realize that everything you've built was rooted in lies. The false collapses. The masks fall. And in that raw, terrifying stillness, something activates. You begin remembering, not with your brain, but with your being. You remember that you came here not to blend in, but to disrupt, to disarm illusion, to carry frequencies that this broken world has forgotten. And this is where your first shadow power begins to emerge, the power of sovereign perception. You stop seeing the world as others see it. You begin to see the patterns behind people's words. You notice the manipulation in systems. You feel energy before it enters a room. You understand the language of symbols, of dreams, of silence. Your perception becomes your weapon. And this makes you untouchable by lower forces because they can no longer hide in illusion. They thrive in distortion, but your eyes are too clear, your gut too sharp, your presence too disruptive. But this gift comes with a cost. You start to feel isolated. You try to warn others, to share what you see, but they look at you like you're crazy. This is part of the test. Can you hold the truth without needing anyone else to validate it? Can you trust your perception when everyone around you is still asleep? This is where most break. But the dark chosen ones don't break, we transform. We don't seek the light to rescue us. We become the light inside the dark. As this perception sharpens, a second power emerges, energetic immunity. Your field becomes stronger. You don't just protect yourself, you radiate such precision that lower entities cannot even approach you without burning themselves. You don't need to chant or cleanse every day. Your very presence becomes purification. But here's the secret. This power doesn't come from love and light. It comes from facing your shadow so deeply that you no longer fear it. You're not running from your demons, you've sat with them. Looked them in the eye. And in doing so, you've made peace with the frequencies they use to manipulate others. That's why they can't touch you. You've already met them and you didn't flinch. You start to realize that the world is a matrix of energy, and most people are puppets to forces they don't even see. But you become unprogrammable. You don't react the way they want you to. You don't get triggered by the same spells. You've built a firewall inside your soul, one forged in the fire of your own inner hell. And that makes you invisible to their tracking systems. You walk through this world like a ghost when you want to, like a storm when you must. You choose, that's power. But now comes the strange part. As your energy shifts, the darkness begins to respect you. Not fear, respect. There's a difference. Lower entities may try to test you, but they know who you are. They remember your soul. They remember the lifetimes you've walked through dimensions they could never survive. And as you anchor into your essence, you begin to sense it. The chaos that once chased you now bows before you. Not because you defeated it, but because you embodied it without becoming it. So I ask you something few dare to ponder. What if the very darkness you feared your whole life was actually your initiation into power? What if the demons weren't your enemies but your trainers? What if your suffering wasn't just pain but preparation? This is just the beginning. There are more shadow powers coming, gifts so profound, so rare, that they can only be unlocked by walking through realms most will never touch. The Shadow Crown, why embracing your rage turns you into a living weapon of truth. There is a moment in every dark chosen one's life when the rage becomes unbearable. Not the petty anger of ego, not the surface frustration of daily annoyances. This is primordial rage. It isn't loud always. Sometimes it's silent, simmering under the skin like molten lava. Other times it erupts uncontrollably, and you find yourself shaking, crying, or walking through the world like a weapon that hasn't been fired yet. This rage doesn't come from the personality. It comes from the soul. It's the soul's sacred rebellion against the lies it's been forced to live in, against the systems that have muted its truth, against the lifetimes of betrayal, abandonment, and spiritual amnesia. And most people suppress it. They fear their rage. But the dark chosen ones, we wear it. We crown ourselves with it. Because when conscious, this rage becomes your third shadow power, the sacred fire of alchemical rage. We live in a world that tells us to be calm, to be passive, to vibrate higher. But what they don't tell you is that rage, when owned, felt, and refined, is not poison. It's rocket fuel. It's clarity. It's raw, unfiltered truth. Rage is what awakens you when nothing else can. Rage is what burns down the false self so your real self can be born. Rage is what makes you stand up and say, "No more." And in that moment, something ancient stirs inside you. You remember that you were never meant to be docile. You were meant to be a living sword carved from fire, sharpened by pain, and guided by cosmic justice. But let's be clear, unconscious rage is chaos. It destroys needlessly. It lashes out. It becomes a slave to the very forces it was meant to overcome. That's why most people fear it. They've only seen it in its wounded form. But dark chosen ones don't suppress rage, we refine it. We take it into silence. We hold it like a sacred flame. We ask it what it's here to teach. And when we do, we unlock one of the most feared and rarely understood powers on this planet, embodied disruption. The ability to walk into a room and shift the vibration just by existing. Not because we're angry, but because we're pure. Pure in our clarity. Pure in our intent. Pure in our alignment with the truth. This is when you begin to notice something strange. People either gravitate toward you or they run. They either feel safe in your presence or they can't stand to look you in the eyes. Why? Because you've stopped playing the social game. You've stopped contorting yourself to fit into illusions. You've become a mirror, a living reflection of everything others are pretending not to feel. And that mirror is sharp. It's surgical. It cuts through the masks. And demons, energetic parasites, thought forms, low-frequency entities, they hate mirrors. They can't survive in the presence of someone who sees clearly and feels deeply. Your conscious rage becomes a repellent. a firewall, a signal that says, this vessel is not available for manipulation. This temple is guarded by fire. And here's what they don't expect: that your rage also becomes a healing force. You begin to use it not just to protect, but to liberate. You speak truth when others are too afraid. You break illusions that have enslaved people for years. You say the thing no one else dares to say, and it cracks the energy open. That's not violence. That's sacred disruption. That's divine justice moving through a vessel that has earned it. You become an instrument of balance, a warrior of alignment, a spiritual enforcer, and the world begins to respond. But this power isn't about dominance. It's about devotion. Devotion to truth. Devotion to your soul. Devotion to the frequencies that can't be faked. And that's why very few can hold it. Because it demands that you sacrifice your need to be liked, your need to be understood, your need to be comfortable. It demands that you become clean in your anger, that you no longer use it to harm but to reveal. And that takes discipline. It takes shadow work. It takes sitting in your pain until it purifies into power. So I ask you now, has your rage been trying to tell you something? Have you mistaken your fire for a flaw when it's actually your armor? Have you been taught to fear a part of yourself that was custom-built to break the chains of this reality? Because the truth is, when you finally embrace your rage, when you merge with it instead of run from it, you unlock a frequency that makes you untouchable. Not because you're invincible, but because you're aligned. Your energy becomes so precise, so surgical, that lower forces can't even find a way in. You become a fortress of fire, not because you fight everything, but because you burn away everything that isn't true. This is the shadow crown, not a symbol of ego, but of earned sovereignty. It's not about being feared. It's about being felt so deeply, so honestly, that even the non-physical world takes notice. And when you wear it, you don't need to announce yourself. The energy does it for you. The cloak of the invisible, how to master shadow frequency so you can vanish at will. There's a level of power that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar. It doesn't seek attention. It disappears. Not out of fear, but out of mastery. We, the dark chosen ones, are not always meant to walk in the open. There are times when our greatest weapon is not what we reveal, but what we withhold, what we hide in plain sight. The third eye open, but the face unreadable. The energy vibrating like a silent storm, but the body still unassuming. This is the fourth shadow power, the cloak of the invisible. And it is one of the most advanced skills a dark soul can carry. To vanish at will means more than just removing yourself from situations physically. It's about shifting your frequency so precisely that reality no longer registers you as a target. You become unreachable to toxic people, undetectable to dark entities, untraceable by spiritual parasites who feed off chaos and emotional triggers. How? Because you've learned to control your signal. You no longer pour your energy outward trying to be seen, validated, or understood. You draw that energy inward. You conserve it. You refine it. And in doing so, you become like a black hole, silent, dense, impenetrable. But this is not isolation. It's sovereignty. It's not about hiding from the world. It's about mastering your presence so deeply that you choose when and how to be felt. You choose when to be visible and when to be invisible. That's the difference between spiritual power and spiritual dependency. Most people crave to be seen because they're still leaking energy. They don't know how to hold their field. But we, those who have walked through shadow, understand the sacredness of invisibility. We know that exposure is not always power. Sometimes the strongest move is to vanish entirely, to go dark, to become silent. And in that silence we grow sharper, we rewire, we recharge, we remember. This power becomes especially important when you're surrounded by distorted energy, whether in the physical world or the unseen. You'll notice that when your field is loud, when your emotions are ungrounded, when your thoughts are scattered, you become like a beacon. And not all who are drawn to your light come with love. Some come to feed, some come to manipulate, some come to siphon what they cannot generate on their own. But when you master the shadow frequency, you stop broadcasting. You stop leaking psychic signals. You become opaque, and in that opacity you become untouchable. There's also a deeper layer to this power: emotional invisibility. People don't talk about this, but it's one of the most important skills for chosen ones operating in hostile environments. Emotional invisibility means you no longer react in ways that reveal your inner code. You don't flinch when provoked. You don't over-explain when accused. You don't seek justice from those incapable of it. You let your energy speak for itself. You let your silence haunt. You let your absence disrupt more than your presence ever could. But this level of control doesn't come easy. It requires you to know yourself so deeply that no one can use your pain against you. It requires you to sit in your own discomfort without reaching for external validation. It demands that you detach from the need to be seen as good, as right, as enlightened. You must become indifferent to the projections of others, not because you don't care, but because you've realized that truth doesn't need to defend itself. It only needs to remain unaltered. Think about it. How many times have you explained yourself to people who were committed to misunderstanding you? How many times have you given your energy to battles that only drained you further? What if the real power wasn't in winning but in withdrawing completely? What if the real flex is being so rooted in your frequency that you don't even react to distortion, you dissolve it by disappearing into your own center? That is the cloak. And it's more than a defense. It's a strategy. There will be times on your path when visibility is necessary, when your voice becomes a sword, when your light must shine. But then there are times when you must retreat. Not because you're weak, but because you're calculating. Because you're conserving your power for the real battles. Because you've learned that not every attack deserves a counterstrike. Some only deserve your absence. Silence is not empty. It's full of energy that you now control. Invisibility also allows you to observe without being entangled. You begin to see how the world moves, how people operate, their fears, their projections, their subtle manipulations. You see it all, but you don't react. You don't get pulled in. You don't get baited. You simply watch. And in that watching, you gather intelligence, you build wisdom. You learn when to strike, when to speak, and when to disappear without leaving a trace. So I ask you this: when did you last feel the power of being unseen, not ignored, but unavailable? When did you last choose silence, not from fear, but from strategy? Have you mastered the art of being invisible, not to escape, but to elevate? Because when you master the cloak, you no longer walk through the world like prey. You move like a phantom, a shadow, an oracle in human skin. And even demons will hesitate before they approach your field. The fifth seal: how death energy becomes the source of your immortality. There is a final power that separates the dark chosen ones from all others. It is not loud. It is not beautiful. It does not sparkle in the way that spirituality has been marketed to the masses. It is quiet, heavy, inevitable. It is the power that only awakens after you've danced with death, not just the death of others, but the death of yourself. And it is through this confrontation with the end that you unlock the fifth shadow gift, the mastery of death energy, and with it, a strange form of immortality. We're told death is the enemy. We're raised to fear it. Society trains us to cling to youth, to resist endings, to run from silence. But the dark chosen ones we see differently. We know death is not the opposite of life. It is the guardian of life. It is the final gatekeeper of transformation. And those who fear death never truly live. But those who embrace it become eternal, because to master death energy is to master the essence of all change, all rebirth, all evolution. When I say death energy, I don't mean physical death alone. I mean the energy of letting go so completely that you no longer exist in the same form. It's the shattering of the ego, the dissolving of identity, the moment when everything you thought you were disappears and something ancient awakens in its place. When you've died enough times inside, lost everything, been emptied out, faced your deepest fears and still breathed through it, something clicks. You become unshakable, not because life gets easier, but because you no longer resist its cycles. You flow with death, and in doing so you become free. This is where demons can no longer touch you because you've already walked through the gates they threaten people with. You've already been to hell and back, and you didn't just survive, you evolved. Death becomes your companion, your ally. You don't fear endings anymore, you welcome them. You recognize them as sacred initiations, and this makes you very, very dangerous to any force that feeds on feeds. Because fear of death is the root of all control systems, emotional, mental, spiritual. And when you no longer fear it, you become incorruptible. This is the secret of the fifth shadow power. Immortality is not about living forever, it's about no longer being held hostage by endings. When you carry death in your field as an ally, your presence becomes still, magnetic, and timeless. People feel it. They don't know why you feel ancient, powerful, or grounded beyond your years, but it's because you carry the weight of death with peace. You don't flinch at loss, you don't panic at collapse, you let it happen. You trust the purge. You surrender to the void, because you've seen it all before, and now you walk with it. This is why some of the most powerful spiritual beings on earth are quiet. They've passed through so many deaths, so many ego dissolutions, that they no longer need to prove anything. They don't speak to be heard. They speak when the universe moves through them. They don't serve for attention. They serve because it is written. And they can disappear in plain sight, not because they're hiding, but because they've merged with the unseen. So I ask you now, from the deepest place in my soul to yours, what part of you still fears death? What identity are you still defending like it's your salvation, when in truth it's your prison? What would it feel like to let yourself die, not in body, but in attachment, so that something eternal can emerge? Because the final gift of the dark chosen ones is not to escape death, but to become one with it. And in that union, we become immortal, untraceable, unbreakable, not because we cheat the cycles, but because we embody them. We don't run from endings, we are the ending, and through us the new world is born. You are not here to survive, you are here to resurrect.